No matter what miniature you're painting, you're bound to stumble into some sort of leather. Because whether we're in the sci-fi universe of Warhammer 40k or virtually any fantasy universe, there apparently is no better material than cowhide and some metal buckles to carry anything and everything on your person. So if you're tired of having these parts really be more of an afterthought in your paint job and looking very bland, always painted with the same leather brown, well, my friends, then you've come to the right place. Because in today's video, we're going to be talking about textures and how to paint them in a large scale. But this knowledge can easily be applied to a small scale painting as well. I'll be showing you how to paint 3 different types of texture, but we'll focus mostly on the leather bits. And if you feel like you want to dig a bit deeper with this paint job and the other textures, well, then I have extended lessons on each section available to my patrons over on Patreon. And there's in fact also a discount code if you'd like to purchase the model that we're painting today, which is Captain Otto by Lucas Saba. Just please note that if you're watching this video far into the future, the code might no longer be valid. Let's get started. I start off sketching these cold violet undertones. My initial starting point for this painting was to create something that was in a very cold atmosphere, but that kind of changes as we go along, and it probably would have been better for the video if I had made this decision beforehand, but really I think a part of the experience of painting and what makes it fun and interesting is also this experimentation and trying to figure out things as we go along. I make a brief detour in the sketch to paint the eyes, and here I'm just covering the whites of the eyes with a cold gray and then finding the boundaries of the iris, filling in the color of the eyes, then the pupil, and in the very end the reflection. Textures really don't have to be heavily time consuming. One really easy and kind of fun technique that I found is to use a dry brush such as this one to stipple on layers of opaque paint. You really want to make sure that you're using paint that it hasn't been thinned down too much and that you're letting the paint dry before coming in with the next layer. Don't use brush strokes, simply just stab the model with the tip of the paintbrush. Once we have the texture and volume in place, we can start to think about adding a bit more of color. For this leather, I'd like to work with some browns, so I use some transparent browns through the airbrush to glaze. I'll pull out some heavy body Van Dyke brown from Schminke and some royal brown from Chimera. And I'm especially careful with the royal brown though. This is a very saturated color and can very easily cover everything and make everything this reddish brown. Remember, we want that color variation and that feeling of worn leather. So I want to make sure that it has this desaturated variety to it. So we don't want to make a glaze that covers everything perfectly evenly. We want it to be stronger in some places and weaker in others. And all of this helps to create variation. Once the glaze is done, I'll come in with the brush and create a bit more of a controlled highlight. So I'm making a strong central reflection right here on the side of the hat. I used quite a bit of time in this painting to paint the skin tones on the face and to refine them to a standard that I like. Notice how I'm using the same stippling motion that we were using on the leather, but here we're simply using thinner paints and trying to go for a bit more of a smoother texture, though it doesn't have to be butter smooth. Skin can definitely have texture, and we'll add a little bit of detail with a scar in the end. The volumes on the face are quite large, and it kind of lends itself to this cartoony style that Lucas sculpts, but you really want to make sure not to add too strong shadows to the recesses in the face. I'm also thinking a bit about the color zones on the face. That means that the chin generally should be cooler and that the cheeks and nose should be warmer, using stronger additions of red in these parts. The volume on the ear is such a lovely shape, and like I really enjoyed painting this, and you also really want to make sure to use more of the red with the ear. And when we're blending the face, we're seeing more examples of the stippling motion being used and a bit of glazing with the heavy body acrylics. I really enjoy the heavy body acrylics for this. I think it's because they're satin and naturally have lower coverage, so glazing with them just makes a lot more sense than it does with the Chimera paints. In fact, I never really enjoyed glazing until I tried it with these heavy body acrylics, and here it is. So nice, seriously. For the gold NMM bits, I'm going with more of a green gold that has a little bit more cold tones in it, maybe different from the orange gold that you've probably seen me paint before and that we're used to seeing in fantasy miniatures. And this is really where the scheme starts to come into its own. I think we have these colder green tones on the top and the bottom of the figure, and this is kind of broken by the orange of the face. And to contrast these two quite warm and closer colors, we have that violet in the shadows and the purple cooler tones on the tentacle that hangs around his neck. I'm thinking about the same weathered texture that we were using on the hat. If the hat has so much wear and tear, the gold shouldn't be, this gold emblem shouldn't be bright and shiny and polished, right? This also has to have some wear, so we're still using the textured brushstroke to paint this. But we can use higher contrast and especially focus on some edge highlights on the top and the bottom. For the shirt, I really like the green gold recipe, so I'm using a bit of the same here for the shirt, just using a different brushstroke and not pushing the contrast quite as high. So here we're seeing much more of the midtones that we were playing with the gold. These take up a larger majority of the space that we have available, and we're kind of shading the general surface to be much darker in one corner and be brighter in the other. I'm also painting the lining more of that same green gold color. I did a bit more of texturing and glazing, and then I called the miniature finished. If you like what you've seen here, I hope you'll consider supporting me over on Patreon, where you can get access to the full kind of deep dive into this paint job, as well as many other lessons that I have available. You'll also get access to exclusive lessons that no one here on YouTube gets to watch. I hope to see you there. Thank you so much for watching, and here's Captain Otto.